It's coming. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Finally, we're back again with Rawan Taha, who's going to talk to us about interviews. So, Rawan, I know that you get a lot of questions. Why don't you take it from here? In the meantime, I will ask people to say hi first. But also, if you have a question, let's go ahead and put a question in the chat. Start it with capital question so that we don't miss it. While Rawan's telling you more about what she knows about interviews and how you too will have a no more secrets to interviews after today. Rawan, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sue, and it's a
So,
pleasure
Rawan,
being here
I know
today.
that you get a lot of questions. Why don't you take it from? Sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. Thank you so much, Sue, and it's such a pleasure being here today. Thank you to everybody as well for registering and being here. I know it's a Saturday afternoon, so we really appreciate it. If you're on the chat today or if you're with us on this live stream, please do write in the chat where you're tuning in from and your name so that we can be aware of the audience, and we'll feature some of those on the screen. Today we're going to be talking about interviews. This is a question that many people, or it's a topic that's a very hot topic that many candidates ask me about. There's a whole chapter of secrets to interviews in my book, but I thought today, let me gather some of these most pertinent questions and discuss them with all of you, as these are questions that frequently appear in my inbox and in the comments on my posts. And of course, I'll take questions from the audience as they come along. The priority goes to the audience that's live here today. So if you do have a question, don't be shy. It's your time to ask, and this webinar is really for you. If I don't get through the whole presentation, it's okay. I would rather spend time interacting with you and using it as a one-on-one time. I don't mind sharing the slides later. Um, or just posting it on my LinkedIn. I don't mind at all. Just a reminder, if your LinkedIn is set to private, if the settings of your profile are private, then we cannot see your name when you type in the comments. That's just something for you to action later on. If you want to be visible on LinkedIn, make sure your profile is public.
Great
Um,
reminder. Thanks.
All right, so I could see I could see two LinkedIn users. I could see somebody from West Africa, bonjour. Somebody from India, also bonjour. Namatama from Mozambique, hi. And so it's a good global audience. I know 220 people registered today. So I'll try to get started right away so that I can have time to go through the presentation and also get through your questions. Okay, good morning to everyone. Sue, before we start, do you want to remind everyone of the resources that you have through Sue Mentors?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I hope I'm connected to you, but if not, I'm going to drop my LinkedIn URL in the chat. I'm known as Sue Mentors and do this variety of things that help support you in transition of all kind, whether it's job searching or getting a promotion or a fellowship. So I'm excited to be here and meet new friends and new colleagues. I have a variety of resources on my company page. That's how you join this, Sue Mentors. One of the things that I'm known for now is a short course on building and updating your professional presence. 4 steps that sometimes we don't think about when we're thinking about, oh, I have to get a job. So some of the folks that have joined today already know about this, about uncovering your evidence. I work on evidence-based results because I'm a program evaluator for a long time. So thank you, Rawan. I'm happy to meet everybody, happy to share my resources, and I'll drop those in the chat.
Okay, thank you so much, Sue. And with that, let me start the show. Um, 1 second. All right. You could see the presentation, right, Sue?
I can, yes, and
All
we're
right.
getting
Okay,
go ahead.
awesome. So we'll get started right away. As I said, My name is Rawan. I work for the United Nations World Food Program. I'm based in Namibia. I am a reporting officer every day from 8 to 5, but I'm also very passionate about youth employment. I wrote a book called No More Job Secrets to help people also access decent employment, especially in international development. Today, we're not talking about employment as a whole, we're just talking about interviews. So that's my bio in a nutshell. Today's not about me, so I'll just skip that. If you are already following me on LinkedIn, that's great. If not, you can feel free to follow me. I share jobs and opportunities for you. This is my background in a picture. It is my education on the left, and my international employment on the right with UNDP CRS and now with the World Food Program. And in the middle is my side hustles, my unemployment, my book writing, and my mentoring, which is where I met my own mentor, Sue. So I just want to share that with you all, that sometimes what appears to be is nothing, and when you're making no money, it could be the most productive time of your life. So just give credit to yourself if you're currently in the middle phase as well. Um, so this is the cover of my book, and then we'll get started. Oh, the font is tiny for some reason, but it's okay. So the first slide basically says, I don't know what happened to the font, technical error, but it basically says, if you have no trouble getting to the interview stage, which is what we're talking about today, but you're not getting the job, then the problem is not your CV and the problem is not your cover letter. The problem is likely your interview skills if this is happening repeatedly. If you're being invited for one interview after the other and you're not getting any job offers at all. I'm not saying bad job offers or job offers that are not your dream job, but if you're not getting any job offers at all, then likely the problem is your interview skills, which is what we're here to discuss today. So the objective of this session today is for you to perform in an interview to the best of your capacity. And the reason that I'm not saying the objective of the session is for you to get the job, because there are some external factors that are out of your control. You may go to an interview and there may be a candidate that performs better than you, that has a better profile, that has that X factor that the company is looking for, or the person has a strong connection to somebody in the company. None of your business. The objective for the session today is for you to focus on yourself, not on anybody else, and to really leave that interview room feeling that you've done everything you can, you've left a good impression, you were so prepared, and there's nothing further you would have done, or there's nothing further that you could change. So before we get to the secrets of the interviews, I want to get to the basics first, because I don't want to start talking about intricacies and tricks and details, and there's people that really don't do the basics in an interview. So there's some basic secrets that I want you to know. If anybody has a question as I go along, you can feel free to write it in the chat. And Sue, you can also, if you spot a question, you can moderate and you can take it just to ask me the question so that the conversation is more interactive. So 10 do's before an interview. Number one, get a copy of the job description. I know this sounds so intuitive, but it's not. Lots of people do not do this. So for example, if you saw a job on a job board online on any website, and then you applied for the job, sometimes these job boards, they require the recruiter or the employer to pay to get that job posting up. So after a certain period of time, the job posting expires and the job post is taken down. So when they invite you to an interview in 2, 3 months, or even 6 months, some recruitments take a long time, that job posting is taken down and you're scrambling looking for the job post. You're scrambling looking for the job description for you to prepare for an interview. So please, 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 if you apply for a job, it's as simple as copy and paste. Copy paste that job description on a file on your computer so that in case it's taken down, you have something to guide you through. You have a blueprint for the interview. Without it, you are not likely to perform well. And it really gives a bad impression of the recruiter if the recruiter tells you you're invited to interview for the position of a monitoring and evaluation officer. And you're like, what? Can you share the job description? You really give a bad impression before you've even been interviewed. So spare yourself the embarrassment and get a copy of the job description. Number two, once you have that job description, Prepare examples against each of the job requirements. Again, that sounds very intuitive, but not a lot of people go to interviews with prepared examples. They go and they scramble, they don't have anything tangible to say, nothing quantifiable. And again, it gives a bad impression to the recruiter. So, very basic things. Number three, practice saying these answers out loud. Do not just say them in your head. So, sometimes your tongue will really trick you. You will think you're very fluent in saying these examples from your job, but then when you come to say these answers out loud, you will not be able to. I'll give you a few tools in a few slides, how you can practice and with what. But really do not complicate the process. Even if you do not want to go to the process of going through tools and downloading softwares, all you need is a mirror, really. You don't need more than that, but just practice saying these answers out loud. Number four, research the company using its website, Google, LinkedIn, and Glassdoor. So the bare minimum that you could do is research the website of the company, find out what their vision is, what their mission is, what their values are, what these people do on a day-to-day basis. If you want to work with them, you need to know what they do. And it really shows in an interview if you've done your homework or not. It shows from the first question even. So this is a basic thing to do for an interview. Google the company, of course, find out what's happening, what are they doing, are there any press releases written about them, what's happening on the ground. Open their LinkedIn, check the profiles of the people that work in their company, filter by the company's name, find out who works there, and check these people. Stalk them, as the colloquial saying is, really stalk them. Find out what these people do. Is there a cultural fit between you and this organization or not? Because as much as a job could be great, if you do not fit in the culture, then you could be that person who's jumping from one job to another because you're not a cultural fit for the organization, which is something you should not take for granted. And LinkedIn is a great tool to find out if you're honest with yourself, if you're the right cultural fit or not. And another website is Glassdoor. Glassdoor is a great tool and a great website that you can use before an interview to find out a lot of things. You can find out how interviews are being conducted. You can find out what people are saying about this company. You can even find out salary ranges. So Glassdoor, as the name of the website implies, it's a glass door. It's transparent. It's anonymous and it's free. So it's a very good way for you to really investigate a company from the outside looking in, because many times it's really hard to find out insider information while you're on the outside. But with Glassdoor, it's a great tool, and it's really one of the best right now for you to research the company. Prepare intelligent questions to ask the panel. Number five, do not be quiet when the panel asks you, do you have any questions for us? And those questions should not be like, what are the benefits, or questions about you, but they should be really questions that show you're interested in the company. So that's a basic rule. And even better than preparing an intelligent question, you can have an intelligent answer. So you could say, a really good secret and a trick that not a lot of people use is coming with the solutions, like entering that interview with the solutions. Like, from my reading, I noticed that the company has many funding gaps. Why don't you investigate in private funding? Something like that, something that really shows you've done your homework, you studied for the interview, and you're really interested in the job, and you're coming with a proactive attitude.
Rawan, before you go on, I just wanted to let you know there was a sort of a question there, and I thought it might fit in number five, which is the opportunity to talk about soft skills without saying I'm an excellent communicator or I'm a real people person. Do you want me to give an example for number five? You said intelligent questions, about how the interviewee could add that in.
Yeah, sure, go for it, Sue.
Okay. So thank you, Satya, for this interesting comment question. It's always hard to use what I call self-value judgment words, which are, I'm a strong communicator. I'm an excellent team player. That's your judgment. Maybe people have told you, but they're not in the room with you. But what you can do is give, as Rawan was talking about, come with a solution into whatever they're asking. So your question might be related to something they talked about before, in which case you could say something like, when you asked about a time that I helped resolve a conflict, what I also did in that situation was use my listening and the fact that I listen carefully and hear from all sides to make sure that I could represent fairly a solution for moving forward. Or if you hadn't had a discussion previously, you could say, I'm interested in the way in which in orientation, you will be able to help me better and more quickly understand your company's culture. I am known to be a fast learner. For example, recently I took a course in X and was able to do Y immediately. So you're leading them through, this is my soft skill, listening. This is my soft skill, fast learning, things that you can't demonstrate easily in writing. So thanks for the opportunity to break in, Rawan.
No, thanks, Sue. And it's great because sometimes really the best way to show your skills is by demonstrating them. Some things people will not always trust in your potential, but it's hard to argue against skills. So instead of saying, I'm a good communicator, if you could show that through writing good emails to the HR officer, if you could show that through asking clear questions, then you've made your point. And people can't argue against your skills, but against what you say, they can always find an excuse or an argument. So thank you for that question, Satya. Number 6, find out the format of an interview. So during COVID, interviews were more likely to be online. Now interviews are starting to be back on site. So find out the format of an interview. Please don't assume. If it's online, find out which platform this company is using. Are they using Zoom? Are they using Teams? A lot of candidates sometimes show up late to the interviews, which are online. They struggle to log in. I understand sometimes there's technical difficulties, but do not let it be you're clicking on the link for the first time. You have no idea how to use this platform. The recruiter is interviewing many people on the same day, and really do not make that your first impression. It will be hard to get rid of that impression. Test your mic and video if you're interviewing online. Print a copy of your resume and have it accessible so that everything you're saying is aligned. Your CV is in sync with your cover letter, is in sync with what you're saying in the interview. Because if not, unfortunately, people will think that either you're not prepared or you're not telling the truth. You need to have a clear story from the second you apply until you're given the job. So have a copy of your resume to make sure, not so that you're reading, but to make sure that you are consistent, that you have a clear story that you're telling to the recruiter. Research the interviewer on LinkedIn, please. Lots of times the HR officer will copy the interviewer in the email when they send you an invite. If not, at least find out who the hiring manager is. If you're applying for, let's say, a role as a gender advocate or a role in climate change, do your research to find out who is the program manager for climate change in that company. Try to get their name at least. If you are, please research the interviewer. Listen to the question. If you don't understand, ask for clarity and think before responding. Do not just ramble. It gives a really bad impression. How do you respond if you cannot answer a particular question? Sylvie, Alex, Sylvie. Okay, good question. I don't understand what you mean by that. If you cannot answer a particular question, let's say you need time to think. Alex, you can just tell the interviewer, that's a really good question. Just give me a second to think about it. If it's something that you've never worked on before, you can be honest. I would always say, like, be honest, but not modest. So you could say, if the interviewer asks you, do you know how to use the InDesign software? And your answer is no, you've never used it in your life. You could say no, and then segue into something more positive. You could say no, but I would be willing to learn. In my previous job, I was not able to use XYZ software, and I became a proficient user within 3 months. So definitely don't lie. You will get caught. And if you get caught lying at the beginning of an interview or even in the middle of an interview, you will not be given the job and you will lose all accountability. So if you cannot respond to a question, think about it. You're a human being. You have the right to think. You should not be robotic. And I'll answer even the opposite. If somebody asks you a question that you know the answer to, don't just say it like you memorized it. You should also still think and give a more natural response. But yeah, that would be my answer to you, Alex. At the same time, make sure that you try as much as possible to not be in that situation. So try to prepare as much as possible before an interview so that you're not really surprised. Keep in mind that the hiring manager is looking for somebody to hire. They're not, they're not they're not trying to just eliminate people for no reason. So try to prepare as much as possible. Prepare answers to the cliche questions such as introduce yourself, tell us about a time where you had a difficult moment dealing with a colleague. These cliche questions you should have answers to. There would be no excuse. If there's a really surprising question, think about it. You could say, I'll get back to you. I don't know. Be a human being. It's fine, but don't lie. Okay, so now I'm going to move to the Q&A. There's some questions that I've consolidated that people have messaged me or people have sent me when I announced the webinar or even before. I'll go through the questions, but still, if you have a follow-up question, if there's something else you want to ask me, just put it in the chat, and I'll project the good questions or the questions that I feel are common so that the session is not tailored to a specific person since it's a global and a very diverse audience, but just to try to cater to everybody's questions. I'll just go through the slides, and then if there's a good question, I'll project it on the screen. So the first question, what is the first thing I should do after receiving an email that I have been invited for an interview? I know this seems like a simple question, but it's really not. It's actually a very intelligent question because most people really do nothing. They just receive an interview email and they do nothing, but that's not your role. You should respond to the HR officer saying thank you and asking how the interview will be conducted. Sometimes this question is in the email. So if it is, please don't ask for repetitive information. The HR officer is not interviewing you alone. At a minimum, you will be interviewed with 2 to 3 other candidates as an absolute minimum. So do not ask questions that the answer is already there in an email. It shows that you're not focused. But if the answer is not, also an HR officer has many recruitments, many candidates, if the answer is not there. So let's say you receive an email for an interview and they're just telling you there's an assessment. You have to reply and ask what kind of assessment. So please don't assume. If you have a technical assessment, it will be very different from a competency-based interview. It will be very different from an aptitude test, which organizations are sometimes doing now to assess your numerical reasoning, your logic, and your verbal ability, kind of like the SATs if anybody went to an American school. So the preparation will vary according to the interview type and modality. Of course, some interview types are more common for certain roles than others. So for example, if you're applying for a communication role, in most cases, you will be asked to write something. You're going to be writing day and night for the organization, writing social media posts, writing blogs. So they're going to want to see your writing. So you will have some communications test of some sort. The interviewer is not going to tell you your interview will be to write a Twitter post, but they're just going to tell you it will be a writing test. And more often than not, I'm not saying that's the best practice to do, but organizations are having multiple interviews. So say the first level of interview is a video recorded interview, or the first level of an interview is a written exam, and then you will have another interview with a panel. So also you can ask how many rounds of interviews are expected as a part of this recruitment. And you can also decide and judge from the beginning, is this something I want to be invested to? Some organizations have multiple rounds of interviews. Is this something that you're going to commit to from beginning to end, or do you not have the time and bandwidth for that? You can also decide so that you're not dropping out in the middle of the interview process. It's your right to know all this information, but you have to ask. So the first thing you should do is please write back to the HR officer, say thank you, and ask how the interview will be conducted. I can see a question from Ankita Patel, what to say at the end of the interview. I'll get to you. I'll get to you, Ankita, in a second. There's a slide coming about ends of an interview. Okay. Another very, very common question is, how can I prepare for an interview, especially a competency based interview? So, as you know, competency based interviews are becoming more and more common, not only for the UN. I know lots of people think competency based interviews are for the UN, but many companies, use CBIs or competency based interviews, even very large companies like Google and Amazon. And the list goes on. Really, it's just an interview technique. It does not belong to any certain organization. So the reason why CBIs are so popular is because the best way really to assess somebody's performance in a job is to see how they were performing in their previous job, because your previous behavior is likely to indicate your future behavior, or how um, you're going to likely perform in the next job. So this is why CBIs are an effective assessment tool. Sometimes they're used in combination with other resources or combination with other examination techniques like written tests or video recorded interviews or something else. Lots of times, CBIs are not used alone as the sole interview technique. Depending on how much time and money a company has, they might combine them with an assessment center or something else. But in most cases, you will have them in one way or another. So the first way you can prepare for, 1 second, I lost my slides. Let me project them again. Okay, so one way that you can prepare for the interview technique is get a copy of the job description. And we discussed that at the very beginning of the webinar. If somebody's just joining us, when you apply for a job, copy paste the job description and keep it on your computer. You will need this. So this is the blueprint for preparing for a CBI. What you will do is prepare examples against each of the personal and the functional or technical competencies. So let's say the personal competencies for this job is communications and teamwork, and the technical competencies, for example, are management of a team, leadership, if you're applying for a managerial role. So you're gonna use the STAR or the CAR approach and action words. For those of you that don't know what these stand for, STAR is situation, task, action, result, and CAR is context, action, result. So they're basically the same thing. It just depends on which acronym you prefer. And action words. So action words is, for example, performed, measured, procured, managed, analyzed, an action word. I prefer people speaking in the past tense in the interview. So for example, you could say, I managed 100 people in my previous job. And not only that, you need to quantify and be very specific. So for example, you could say, I managed 100 people and I increased company revenue by 20% in the last fiscal year, something like that. So you need to be in an interview, especially the CBI. Remember, the interviewer is not asking you just for the sake of hearing your story, but they want to know what you did and how are you likely to replicate that in your future job. So you can use the STAR technique: situation, what happened; the task, what you were doing; the action, what action you took; and the result, which is quantifiable. So always use a number. It doesn't need to be exact, but again, you need to be saying the truth. Because if you're saying a result that's not accurate, it's very easy for you to be cornered. So if you say, I mobilized $100 million, then suddenly the recruiter will grasp on that and they will say, okay, from which donor, what role what were you playing in the proposal writing? How did you mobilize these resources? How much money was spent? So please do not corner yourself if you're not saying the accurate answer. It doesn't need to be an exact percentage, but you need to be saying the truth, even if it's an estimate. Another thing is when you are in a competency-based interview, you need to be using the pronoun I. So I did this, not we. You can't be saying we did this and we did that. The company is hiring only you. So you should not be speaking on behalf of a large group of people and then when the recruiter gets lost in your story and asks you, yes, but what were you doing? What was your role in that? You can't answer, again, that's not good, because it's great if you were part of a company and it's great that you are demonstrating teamwork. But many times the recruiter wants to see your own leadership and your own capacity. How are you likely to perform as an individual? So CBIs are very important. I'll pause here for a second because I see there's a few questions.
So Rawan, a couple people asked the question that you had noted just before you changed to the screen, which is, what do you say at the end of interviews, or do you have any other questions? So do you want to address that now? I know you're sort of still in the middle of things, but we do have several questions.
Okay. So I'll get to the end of the interviews in a second. So we'll get to that slide. Don't worry. But for people saying, let me just project this slide.
Oh.
How do you answer? Is that it? So there's a question that I just projected. It says, how do you answer the cliche question, what makes you different from other applicants? So it's not really cliche, because no two humans are the same, really. No two humans are the same. And what makes you different from other applicants? It's crucial for the employer to know that. Because sometimes they will be looking for a certain factor beyond the job description. So for example, I could be looking for a graphic designer, and I have 3 CVs in front of me. All of them are from good schools. All of them have excellent profiles. But at this moment, I'm looking for an excuse or a reason to hire one of them and not the 2 others. So I want to know what makes them different. So you could say, for example, really what makes you different, what makes you unique. And if you have that good awareness and that good ability to self-reflect, you will know. I was asked this question for the current job that I have now. And when the recruiter asked me, it's an information management and reporting role. So when the recruiter asked me what makes you different from other applicants, I said, I am very creative. Like, I know for reporting, I'm going to be writing reports. I'm going to be dealing with lots of documents. I'm going to be organizing documents, but I'm very creative. I'm not afraid to make a report stand out, to make it well formatted, to make it readable, to make it not boring for the reader. And that's what I feel makes me really different from others, is that I bring life to things. And eventually I got the job. It may have not been the best answer in the world, but it was authentic, it was sincere, and it was the X factor that the employer was looking for. So do think of this question. Go through the job description, study the website really well, study the job. And the more you dig beneath the surface, you can gauge what the employer is looking for. And then maybe that could be your X factor. Like, let's say if an office has a very high turnover and you discovered that from your little research that people leave after a year or two. So your X factor could be that you bring a really nice positive environment. You bring people together, you're a staff coordinator, you were working on a mental health campaign, something like that. It may not be related technically to your role, but the employer will feel like, oh, wait, maybe this girl can lower the turnover rates because she's going to bring a positive vibe. So it may not be something that's technically related, and you can tailor that answer to whatever you want it to be, but you will be held accountable for your words. Or you can really think and answer the question honestly, but that's a good question, Afifa, and thank you for bringing it up. Okay. So I put a slide here for UN competencies because lots of people ask about that as well. I'll just go through it briefly. Each organization has its own competencies based on the organization's missions, the value, the types of work that they do. For the UN, there's core values for all staff. So if you're applying for a job at the UN, you will find core values on the job description like integrity, professionalism, respect for diversity, because it's a very diverse organization. So you may be asked a question about something like that directly or indirectly. Tell us about a time where you worked with a diverse team, something like that. Or they'll just gauge your answer. What happens? Have you ever been faced with a racist incident? How did you react to this? You may be asked directly or indirectly, but these are core competencies that you should be prepared for. And you can simply Google them, questions on professionalism, and then you can prepare your answer. Then there's personal competencies and there's functional or technical competencies. The personal competencies everybody needs to have. So people in general should be good communicators, have good teamwork, be accountable. So regardless of what it is that you do, whether you are security guard, a driver, an accountant, a tourist guide, whatever, you will need to have these competencies. And then there's competencies that are functional or technical competencies, and these differ based on the role that you're doing. So don't think because your friend was interviewed for a role as a finance officer with UN Women, you're going to be asked the same questions. You're not. The questions differ based on the job description and also based on the role that you're doing, especially the functional or the technical managerial competencies. These differ from role to role. I got a question a couple of days ago from somebody, it was a public post even, that said, I'm being interviewed with a certain UN organization. What will the technical exam be composed of? And I didn't answer because the person didn't tell me what the role was. Obviously, the technical competencies needed for me as a reporting officer are not like somebody who is a gender officer or somebody else that does monitoring and evaluation. Different people have different skills and different techniques, and there's not a one size fits all exam for all these people. So don't think you can just copy paste or look for exams online and be asked the same questions, because you need to tailor your preparation. So over here is just a little table I created on how you can prepare for a competency-based interview, or in general, how you could prepare for an interview. So somebody asked earlier in the conversation, what do I do if I don't know the answer? So one way to prevent this is to guess the questions before you go to the interview. Lots of people don't do this. They just go and they just pray that they're not going to be asked anything surprising. But you can guess, you can prepare what the interviewer is going to ask you. So go through the job description, write the competencies, write the skills. If they say we require somebody to have a graduate degree in this, 3 to 5 years of experience in that, experience communicating, experience being accountable, experience leading a team. So you can write all of these in the left-hand column, and then guess the potential question. So for example, a question on leadership or a question on innovation is, tell us about a time where you dealt with a problem in a new way, or you presented results that were not expected, or you used your creativity. So you can really guess the questions. And then on the right-hand column, examples of your skills and experiences. You don't have to draft the answer, but I would say write points for yourself, bullet points. Like, for example, in my job working at university as a student ambassador, I worked with many students from many countries. So that could be your example. Or in my job working as an intern with XYZ company, I learned how to manage social media platforms. So just examples. You're not meant to be a robot, but just so that when somebody asks you a question, the answers flow from what you've already submitted. So again, there was somebody asking earlier, what makes you stand out? So for the 3 to 5 top attributes, think what makes you stand out. And also think of potential questions and potential answers for that. So I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure who asked it. I think it was Ankita. Okay, I'll stop here for a sec and I'll see the next question. Sue, if you can project something or project the next question.
Sure. So are you at the point where you want to talk about how do you end the interview, or when they say, do you have any more questions, or what would you like to know from us? That came up in 2 different ways.
All right. So I could see a question about ending the interview and following up. I'll get to those in a second, I promise.
Perfect. I think other than that, everything was, but we did get one new question, newer, how to follow up after the interview. And that again, probably should come later. That's always a challenge, but we'll get to that for sure. Thank you for asking.
Okay, thank you, Manuel. And I thank you for the question. It's a very important question as well. And maybe I don't agree with the word annoying, because it's your right um, to find out after an interview. I know many candidates are unfortunately ghosted after a job application, but after an interview, it's just maybe you and a couple of other candidates. So ethically, an employer should get back to you with an answer, but there is a formula, or there is a way to get back and to follow up, so that you're not overly persistent and you look desperate for the job. But in all cases, it's not annoying, so don't worry about that. But I'll get back to you. Okay, so how much time shall I spend preparing for an interview? It depends. It really, really, really depends. Um, I did some research on this question and I saw what other career experts were saying as well. But the answer is in depth research on a medium to large company can take you more than 50 hours. At the beginning, I said one of the basics to making it, or one of the basics to standing out from other candidates in an interview, is no secret at all. It's preparation. The more you prepare, the calmer you will be, the more presentable you will be, the more intelligent your questions will be, and the more you will realize if you are a good fit for the job or not. Because as much as the candidate is looking for the right, like the employer is looking for the right candidate, you should also be looking for an employer that you're proud to work with. So for very large to medium-sized companies, there's many reports you should be reading, podcasts you should be listening to, websites to look at, social media profiles, LinkedIn, Glassdoor profiles. It's a lot of work. So to put 50 hours in perspective, an hour a full working week is 40 hours if you work every day from 8 to 5, Monday to Friday. So 50 hours is as if you're full time dedicating a week to researching the company. I would say for an even larger company, it's an underestimate, because you need to do a lot of reading, a lot of research to prepare. So the bottom line is, whether you want to spend 50 hours or 50 days or whatever you want to spend, it's up to you. But the more prepared you are, the better. Um, which takes me to the next question, which is, when is the best time to start preparing for an interview? Sometimes you're not going to be given 50 hours. Sometimes the employer will message you and say, you have an interview in 2 days, so you don't have 50 hours. So if you're really super excited about a job, I will say start preparing right away, especially if you're the type of person who just applies to 2 to 3 jobs and you really spent a lot of time on your CV and cover letter. Then really invest in the interview, because you have a 1 in 3 chance. Think of it that way. So you want to be more prepared, and you want to be like ready, as ready as possible before you're surprised with the interview day. There's a question in the chat, so I'll stop here. I'll project it and read it. How do you respond to a question which asks for an instance which you have had to compromise your values? Um, to be honest, Arnold, it depends. Like, that's a very tricky question, and it depends on what your values are. So, for example, you could be a person that's really loyal to your friends, that's really loyal to your job and stuff, but you could say a time that I compromised on my values was reporting an incidence of fraud when I found out a certain vendor did not have the necessary qualifications. And although this vendor does deliver great results, or I know this vendor personally, but I compromised on my value of loyalty and giving people a chance, because there's also a value of integrity that I had to stand up to. So this is a tricky question. And in lots of incidences, you will be faced with these situations at work where you're put in uncomfortable situations and you have to report fraud, or you have to report misuse of funds, or um, you have to report harassment or racism, and really difficult situations that you face sometimes at work. So you can think of questions like these, especially if you're preparing for a CBI and you see that the values are there. The company is not going to hide those from you. They're on a job description. So they could say our values are diversity, equity, inclusion, integrity, humanity. So you can look through these values and you can think of examples of what you did to protect these values and what you did to honor them. And also you can think of times where it was not so easy to follow these values, because it's not just jargon that a company uses, but without these values, many organizations would fail, as people would be corrupt and a lot of cases of fraud would happen. So these values are there to protect you, in essence. They're there to protect the beneficiaries. They're there to protect a company's reputation. So the best way to answer this question would be to prepare and be honest. If there wasn't a time where you had to compromise your values, you could also say that. Um, or you could say something like more diplomatic, like, I would resort to the organization's policies and procedures on whistleblowing or on reporting or something like that. If you don't have a concrete example to say, you can just give a textbook answer of how you would follow the policies and procedures. But if you're more prepared, you will know what these policies and procedures are and how to follow them or how to report. So preparation would be the best way. But that's a very tricky question.
Rawan, may I jump in and add a little bit more, because we got a second related question, bending the rules. Generally, with these kinds of questions, I would take the opportunity not to mention specifically, I have a value of X or Y, but try to think about it from what they're asking about is, as Rawan explained, difficult work situations. So you don't have to say, I had to bend the rules for someone. What you say is, let me tell you about a time when I handled a situation that was difficult for me. My supervisor asked me to verify that she stayed at the site the whole time while we were out doing a site visit. I know that she left for a while and went somewhere. Maybe it was just to find something else, whatever it was. So you don't even need to say, I was asked to bend the rules or asked to about a value. Part of it is just for you to reframe it in terms of, as Rawan was saying, what are the work norms and how did you deal with it? It's more difficult if you choose to talk about when you had to actually report someone. But again, Rawan said to you, use the company policies, use the laws, labor laws in your country or in your region, and use those, try to use it in as objective a way as possible. So you are not having to say, well, I have a value of integrity and they didn't do that, but rather let's focus on the key situation. So since we had two different wordings, I wanted to say there's a way to avoid even restating the wording in the person's question and taking control of the conversation by giving people examples. But Rawan's right. Prepare these examples in advance. Know what you're going to say. Prepare, prepare, prepare. Thanks for letting me jump in, Rawan.
No problem, Sue. It's my pleasure. And I also want them to listen to your wisdom because you taught me all I know. So it's so great that you get to jump in. So we only have about 10 minutes remaining, which I didn't realize. I'll try to take more questions. Okay, I'll just project something. Cedric is saying how to behave when the HR officer or manager seems unqualified, because some of them behave like they're making you a favor interviewing you. Okay, so Cedric, again, I would say this is the eccentric situation. It's not the norm. But if this is what you are dealing with or something you have dealt with, you or others, I would say to behave professionally, to carry yourself forward in a way that represents you. Because even if the HR officer is unqualified and you are, you have to prove that and you have to show that by being somebody who's still accommodating, somebody who is professional, somebody who is taking control and taking charge of a staff member who is maybe new or young or unprofessional or whatever the case might be. Because lots of times, especially if you are a senior manager, you will be managing people with different skills and different competencies. So yes, you might have an HR officer who is very competent, but you might have an HR officer who is very unqualified and incompetent. And it's up to you. Like the way you manage and speak to these people is different so that you can bring out the best in them. So I would say to still be very professional. And also to try to make things always so that you have some legal backing in case things get sticky or situations go wrong. To always communicate only through email, not WhatsApp. Try to minimize phone calls so that you always have written evidence in case you were promised of an interview and it didn't happen, or you were promised a salary and you got something else, or whatever else the situation may be. Just try to have solid written proof, and a trail of communications with the HR officer. If you can copy someone else, that would be great, so that there's also a witness to the conversation happening. But in all cases, the conversation is a reflection of you and not the person. So carry yourself professionally, and don't lose your temper or professionalism because somebody else you're dealing with is unprofessional. It's still not an excuse. I'll take another question from Nyama. How do you answer, how do you work as a team? So that should be a pretty straightforward question, and a question that you should also expect, so you should prepare for. You should give examples of how you previously worked as a team, but the key here is to focus on I, not we. So I worked with a team to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and to get deliverables 1, 2, 3, 4. Do not focus on the team delivered a project that was so great and amazing, and then the interviewer is lost about what you were doing or what your role was, or if you were doing nothing at all, or if you were even pulling the team down. So don't let that be the case. It's an easy question. Think about it. Times you worked as a team, times you led a team, times where you were playing a supportive role within a team. Think about these different examples depending on the role you are applying for. Depending on the seniority, your role within a team will differ. So think about it. If you are a young member of staff, maybe your role will be to support people, to follow up with people, to bring items together, to coordinate. Whereas if you're a more senior staff member, your role within a team would differ. So think about these different team dynamics. Think about when something went well. Think about a time when conflict happened as well, because frequently you will be asked about conflict that happened within teams as well and how you dealt with it. So Nyama, that should be a question that you should really prepare for, regardless of the role you will be asked, because very rarely will you be working just by yourself. In most organizations and most roles, it's a team effort, it's a collaborative effort, and you should be able to work within a team. That's a key competency for most roles. So draft an answer to the question. The key thing is situation, task, action, result. Again, what was the situation? What was your task in the team? What was the action you performed? And what was the quantifiable result? Do you want to say something, Sue? I could see, have you unmuted? Okay. Let me see. Let me go to the next slide and I'll answer it, and then we'll take another question. So what tools can I use to practice for interviews? As I told you all, there's more and more tools to practice now. There's a new tool that I just saw. It's called Speako. It's an artificial intelligence speech coach. To practice interviews, there's free versions, there's paid subscriptions, so you could see based on your needs what you prefer. You can also use Zoom or Teams sometimes to record yourself. There's also a platform called Loom, Loom, which is a screen recording tool. So you can record yourself, you could see your facial expressions, you could see your confidence level, you could see if you're speaking fluently or you're stuttering, and you can work on all these things. As I said before, if you don't have any of these tools, it's okay. Use a mirror. Sometimes I just open the camera on my laptop and I use the video recording software there, like just what's already installed on my laptop. So don't complicate things, but do practice, and do practice out loud, because really you can be very betrayed by your mouth when you're nervous and when you're around an audience. So hear your own voice saying the answers. Okay, I'll project the next question because we're running out of time. How, from Madalitzo Makata, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. How should the question, tell us about yourself, be tackled, and how long should it take for one to respond to it? How do you tackle the question on a salary package? And how do you answer the question, tell us about your weaknesses? Okay, that's a lot of questions. So I'll just try to take them one at a time. For tell us about yourself, how should it be tackled and how long for it take you to respond to it? So, how should it be tackled? I don't know if there's a magical formula, but for me, I normally try to focus um, to say about my professional background. I brush on my academic background. I don't dwell on it since I don't apply for academic roles. And then I try to connect the dots for the employer to tell them how I'm a good fit or a great fit for this role and how I would benefit their organization, not how I would be benefited if they hire me. So I just try to connect the dots. Like I do this, I do that, I speak these languages, and I've worked in so and so countries. These are my key competencies. Mention three or four, preferably ones that exist on the job description, and then connect the dots. I feel I would be a great addition to your organization because I have a key competency in mobilizing resources. I have a key competency in bringing people together. I have managed large teams. I speak X number of languages. Connect the dots and make the employer excited to hear more from you. Because this is like, the synopsis of a film. If the employer likes the synopsis, they're going to keep watching the whole film or they're going to keep listening. So this is really the point where you either hook people or you lose them. So make sure you're saying things in a compelling manner, in a story format. Be excited and really let that enthusiasm shine. Because if you're bored saying your own story, other people will probably be bored listening. So really be excited. How long should it take you to respond to it? So it depends. If you are doing these questions, tell us about yourself questions, are normally asked, I have seen in video recorded interviews. So, or video recorded interviews or panel interviews. If it's a video recorded interviews, most times you will be given a time, like a timer. So they'll tell you, you have 3 minutes to answer this question. You will have 4 minutes. Make sure you're answering within the time. You don't answer within a minute and you're done speaking. It shows that you have no context. And make sure you're not overly speaking because then the time is either automatically cut or you don't have time to respond to other questions. I would say, as a rule, maybe don't go over 4 minutes answering any question or 5 minutes. I don't know if there's a rule of thumb, but if you're speaking more than that, it just gets too much. You will get tired, the person will get tired listening. So think of it really as an elevator pitch. You say, front load the statement, say what you want in the first sentence. Um, I'm a development professional with 5 years of experience. I've worked in X countries. I speak 3 languages, and I'm excited and I'm ready to be your next graphic designer in ABC company. So say everything in the first sentence and then unpack it slowly. If you still have their attention, then great, but try to front load it as much as possible because the attention of a human is not that long. How do you tackle the question on the salary? Okay, for the salary, it depends on when you're being asked. So for the salary package, you should have a range in your mind, not a number. So if somebody asks you for a salary, preferably give them a range. And the second thing is where you can get that range from, because you also don't want to underestimate yourself or overestimate yourself. A great source for that also is Glassdoor. So go on glassdoor.com, type the name of the role, procurement assistant at XYZ organization, and more often than not, you will find a salary range on Glassdoor. So the salary range you're providing the employer should be within that range. If it's too low, you will look like you're doubting your own capacity. If it's too high, you will also look like you're not sure. If you're not asked about the salary in an interview, note or keep in mind, or I have also read research that says that you have more room to negotiate once you have a job offer in your hand rather than before. So if somebody gives you a job offer, then you can come back and give them a counter offer. That means they're serious about you, they want you, they see something special about you. So if you have the option or if you're not asked, research says that you have more room to provide a counter offer for a salary when you have a job offer in your hand rather than within an interview. For the question on tell us about your weaknesses, this is also a very common question. I would say that the absolute wrong answer would be to say nothing, because that shows that you have no self-awareness. You're not aware of where you should improve. you're not aware what your weaknesses are, which everybody has weaknesses, but rather you should state a weakness and then segue into something more positive. Also, make sure that your weakness or your key weakness is not something that's crucial for the role. Like if you're applying for a role as an information technology officer, or you're applying for a role as an IT assistant, don't say I don't have experience with computers, because then you really shot yourself in the foot. You could say something like I struggle with public speaking, something you're not going to be doing very often, but something still you need help working on. Um, there's also model answers for the question, tell us about your weakness, that you should Google. Something could be like, I pay way too many attention, sorry, to the details, or I have trouble letting a project go, like I get attached to the details, something like that, that shows still that you are meticulous, you are hardworking, but it's still something that you're working on.
Rowan,
I see that we're at
oh,
time, yeah.
Oh, I just want to jump on that weakness question. I learned from Kirsty Bonner 3 years ago that every weakness is the opposite of one of your positive values. So you could say something like, I've been told that I'm impatient and I've been working on that. And it seems to be that I'm getting more patient now, or something. So you leave people with a positive result and not just I'm too detail oriented, because sometimes detail oriented is good. So yes, we're at time. What do you want to do, Rawan? Do you want to go on, or do you want to? We have a lot of great questions for the next time. We could do a part 2 at some time and ask me anything.
I don't know. So maybe we can go for 5 more minutes, and if you want
Okay.
to add something to the question on the salary as well, because I see that's coming up repetitively.
Sure, happy to talk about salary. So Rawan separated this into sort of 2 ways to think about it. One is the number itself, and one is the compensation package, and depending on when they're asking. Always go in prepared, have a salary in mind, or a salary range. If they haven't already shared it on the job posting, more and more are coming with that information. But try never to be the first person to answer the question. And if they ask you, you're going to say something like, I want to make sure that I fit in your salary range. And I know you're competitively recruiting a lot of candidates. Could you please give me the range that you are expecting to pay for this position? And then I can let you know if it's in my salary expectations. I know that feels like, for me, it feels like, oh, I have to be really senior to be able to say that to someone. But don't forget, if you get into the interview, they clearly want something that they've seen on your resume and from your interview so far. So if you can avoid giving the exact number, if they give you a range and your salary is higher than that, you can say, well, I was expecting a range of X to Y because that's what the market is, or because I come with experience. But try not to have the detailed discussion till they've actually given you a number or a range within a few thousand of whatever your monetary units are that you're using. Does that help, Rawan? Just give you a little more time for a couple more questions.
Yes, exactly. So try, if sometimes you won't have the luxury to not be the first person that asks, or the first person that provides, but you should have a salary range in mind. So maybe like within a few thousands, or within whatever the range is for that particular job and your years of experience. But yeah, you should have a range in mind, and try always to be the second person, or to give a counter offer. I mean, some organizations are great and they don't lowball the candidates. They just give you an authentic offer. So also don't go in with that mentality that they're always lowballing you. Sometimes a salary is not negotiable, but sometimes it will be, and you need to really know your worth and learn how to negotiate. It's a skill, it's a muscle that you can train. There are for your weaknesses. You can always, the key, again, thank you, Sue, for your contribution, but the key is to really segue into something more positive. Don't end the conversation on your weakness. So if somebody tells you what's your weakness, you can't say my weakness is difficulty asking for help, and then you're quiet. No, you cannot end the conversation this way. So you could say, segue into something more positive. Say, because I'm independent and enjoy working quickly, sometimes it's been difficult for me to ask for help. But I have been learning through my previous roles that it's beneficial for both me and the business for me to reach out. This has prevented me from feeling burnt out. It has also allowed me to understand and learn from the expertise on my team. So I have been working on this weakness of being overly independent. But as a result of me working on this weakness, for example, I have been able to produce more high quality work and also to foster a sense of belonging or a sense of working great with a team. So segue into something more positive, regardless of the type of weakness or the weakness that you choose. Okay,
Uh,
so
so we're just about at your 5 minutes. So what do you want to do? We're getting a lot more questions, and they'll take more than 5 minutes to
yes.
answer.
So yeah, just because we're at the end, because I promised I'll answer the questions on what to do at the end of an interview. So I'll just answer those. So briefly, what shall I do at the after an interview or at the end? Sue, if you can just project that question of the, I think it was Madisto asking. So what shall I do after an interview? After an interview, you have to say thank you to the interviewer. Oh, sorry, Alpha. So after the interview, at the end, do you have any further comment? That's a different question. I would advise you, Alpha, at the end of the interview, to ask a smart question, or as I said before, to provide a smart answer in the form of a question. So if you notice that this company is struggling with something, you could say, have you considered doing this? From my research, I have noticed that XYZ, or from my research, I have noticed that like maybe the marketing is not converting into sales, something like that. Have you considered outsourcing for another marketing agent? Something like that. Come up with an answer, a smart answer, rather than ending at a question. You also don't want to sound like a know-it-all, so make sure you're doing this in a humble and friendly way. If you definitely ask the interviewer something. So you can also ask at the end of an interview, when should I expect to hear back? Because that will also prevent you from being ghosted. So when shall I expect to hear back from you? If they say a week, 2 weeks, a month, at least you can leave with that peace of mind, knowing when the interviewer will get back to you. So after an interview, make sure you say thank you to each of the interviewers individually. And then the second thing you should do is, when should you follow up? The person that was asking, I don't want to be annoying. How can I follow up without being annoying? So my answer is this. This is a follow-up summary. If you are contacting a recruiter through email, so let's say the interviewer tells you you have an interview on October 15th. And then you reply, you say, yes, what type of interview is this? How can I best prepare? And then 3 business days have passed. You email on Monday. Until Thursday, the recruiter has not responded. Follow up, please, within 2 to 3 business days. That's just the polite way. You don't want to be overly persistent. So 2 to 3 days if it's an email. If it's a job interview, at the end of the interview, like we agreed, you will ask, when shall I expect that you will get back to me? Let's say you're being interviewed on the 1st of September and the interviewer says, I'll get back to you in a month. So on the 1st of October, the person does not get back to you. On the 2nd of October, if it's a business day, you can write back to them and say, Dear X, I am following back on the interview results for XYZ position for the interview that happened on XYZ date. So if there's no date given, let's say you go to an interview and the recruiter just tells you, we'll get back to you, and you say when, and they say as soon as possible, which is the terminology for many HR officers. So as soon as possible, no date given, 10 to 14 days after. You were interviewed today. You will wait for 2 weeks, 10 to 14 days, or 14 days is like 2 working weeks. So you will wait for 2 working weeks and then get back to the person. this is how you could do it in a way that's professional, not nagging, and in a way that's not annoying. I got these numbers, I researched them, so they're not guesses. They're just they're guesstimates, educated guesstimates of what you should be doing. So don't be overly persistent, but also do not follow up because you don't want to be annoying or nagging. You have to follow up. It's your right. Okay, with that, Sue, I'm gonna be quiet. I can share the presentation. I know I didn't get through all the questions, but do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Rawan for all of her generous time answering all your questions. And also, you can see how many secrets there are about jobs. I would get her book if you can. It's available on Kindle. It's also available in hard copy. But also go back to her posts. A lot of this information in her book on interviews and UN jobs and what to do if you're not paid while you're looking for a job. All of this is information that Rawan posts all the time. And in the last year, she has posted, I think, every single thing from the book. So thank you all for joining us. It was great to see you all from so many different time zones. We realize it may be getting late for some of you, and appreciate your interest. I think we'll be doing more Ask Me Anything so that we can open up like we did today and have your specific questions answered. So Rawan, I'll let you close our wonderful live today.
All right. Thank you so much, Sue. And thank you all for following up. I realize I may have been speaking too fast because I'm trying to get all the questions in, but the recording will be there on LinkedIn. So you can always go back and listen to the recording. Let us know what you think and let us know if you have any further questions. And then next time, as Sue said, it could be a more interactive discussion, which is more conducive for you. And it's also easier for us because it's less prep. But for the book, there is a chapter, I think it's chapter 7. It's called Secrets to Interviews. And it has all this information inside and more. If you're able to get it, that would be great. If not, you can go back to the webinar. And see you next time and have a fantastic weekend. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Bye, everyone.